When I saw that the billboard went up and I saw the story on King or Como, and then we had that woman that came in that said the Blue Angels killed her cat, and she's suing, I thought, I got to call Jim Frank. Jim Frank, who served from 1965 to 1972 as a Navy pilot. Oh, there you are. Oh, my God. Look at you. I haven't seen you in a while. How are you?
Wonderful.
Good. Were you flying the F-4s?
I did only in a transition with the Air Force on an exchange program, so I got about 6 flights in the F-4 Phantom.
Jim, before we get into the Blue Angels and your thoughts on that, you have to share with my audience how you became a pilot.
Well, compressing that story down is hard into a few sentences, but simply put, it was about the equivalent of joining the Foreign Legion for me. Mm-hmm. I was working for the Department of Justice. I was on track to become an agent for the FBI. I was about 20 months into a training program. This was in about 1965. As I went into the Customs Courthouse building where the FBI was located, there was 3 recruiting offices, and there was a Navy and an Army and a Marine Corps. And out in front of the Navy recruiting office was a billboard. And there was a picture, of all things, on that billboard was a deck of an aircraft carrier. And on that deck was an F-4 Phantom being prepared to be launched on cat number 2. And sitting on cat number 1 was this nitro-fueled race car, a guy by the name of Daddy Don Garlitz, who at that time was the nitro-fuel quarter-mile fastest car.
Yes.
And the caption above Daddy Don Garlitz said, 0 to 128 miles an hour in 12.6 seconds, some number, whatever it was. And then above this handsome, studly man in a flight suit leaning up against the F-4, it said, from a dead stop to 10,000 feet, Mach 1, 58 seconds. And I stared and looked at that, and I thought that was so cool. And a guy in a nice white uniform was standing there, and he said, "You want to talk?" And that was all she wrote. So I started the process of seeing if I could take a leave of absence from the Department of Justice, which I did, and went through the process of seeing if I qualified by taking a battery of tests at Glenview Naval Air Station. And that was kind of all she wrote. The next phase of my life started.
You served, so you were in Vietnam from 65 to 72, and you saw a ton of action. You're in that jet, flying all over the world. When I called you to talk about the Blue Angels, you had an interesting take because you could sort of see the people that are anti-Blue Angel, and you sort of said, well, I see their point. And you defended that in a way, didn't you?
Well, softly.
Yes.
And I think that's probably part of mellowing in my old age. When you are above 80, which I am, I happen to be 82, you start realizing that you want to do 2 things in life. One is to listen a lot to other opinions, but I think the other thing is you want to apply common sense, which for a lot of people takes many, many decades to become part of who they are. And when I listened to the people who not only were representing the cat lady, the attorney here for the lawsuit on the cat, I'll comment on that in a minute, but also when I've got right here in front of me the picture of the billboard, Say No to the Blue Angels, I was thinking a moment ago, you said about a half an hour ago on your show, you said you created a new game, a game where you walk into a room with 30, 40, 50 people, right?
Yeah.
And John, I would bet that if you and I walked into a room that had 50 random people and somebody asked the question, who in this room might be opposed to the climate, or who is a climate lover, or who in this room really is opposed to the military, the odds are pretty good. You and I might be pretty close to selecting who that person might be, the person that might be a little bushy beard with a little orange hair, and it might have been a, who knows what the gender is, but the person probably is anti-military, a climate aficionado, thinking everything that they could possibly think negatively about. We could probably pick them out in the room. Birkenstocks, Sprouts in their back pocket. I'm being humorous, obviously,
Yes.
but yes, your game was interesting, and that's kind of how I evolved in my thinking here. The people, if it's okay, I'll go back in time a little bit, and I think you'll understand where I'm going here. When I arrived up at Whidbey Island Naval Air Station in about 1969, I was transitioning to the A6 Intruder aircraft in my career. I was about 3.5 years or so into my Navy career. I heard about this thing called Seafair that was going on. Well, when you arrive at a military base, you get your primary duty. For me, was a pilot, but I also had a collateral billet, and I worked for the JAG Corps, or the attorneys up at the base.
Mm-hmm.
And after I was there just a few weeks, I heard all the attorneys talking about their, quote, this is in 1969, the annual lawsuit that is starting up again, where the local residents up at Whidbey Island are complaining about the noise. 1969, and they said this was going on for 8 or 10 years already, and the lawyers were preparing for their annual barrage. It turns out some farmer near Coupeville, the outlying field from Whidbey Island, was shooting with a .22 rifle or pistol at the A6s when they were doing night carrier practice landings up there. And so the guy was arrested. They never put him into jail, but there was litigation again. And he said, the noise was so loud, my chickens and roosters were killing each other, and they couldn't lay eggs. And, there was a scream, and the noise was out of control. The same identical words from 1970 on. Every year, and even up at Whidbey, I was just up there 6 months ago, the commanding officer said he sets aside in his annual budget for the annual litigation process that takes place, where the local people who bought houses at the end of a runway or near a runway, where the airport has been there since 1949, I think it is, 48, they buy property and then immediately start bitching about how noisy it is. Every year there's been litigation since I arrived up at Whidbey Island. So my first reaction is, I don't give them a lot of slack anymore. I don't know why they don't understand what the sound of freedom means.
Yes. Do you do this? So it costs about $36 to $40 million a year for the Blues. And people say, well, you can't track whether or not a number of people see the Blue Angels and then decide to sign up and follow the military. What do you think it does for the average kid to see those things fly over?
If he's a normal child, and depending on how the parents have crafted the young lad or lass, it could be male or female, you would be crazy to not be excited to see this powerful piece of machinery created by men and flying by, doing things that are just impossible to comprehend. You would have to be impressed by it. So impressed, by the way, that Navy recruiting, we've already maximized our full year recruitment objective this year. A lot of that has to do with Trump getting into office, where he's changed the philosophy with Pete Hegseth. But all the military now are full up on recruiting. And it's like this. It's the Blue Angels. It's a recruiting tool.
Some people say those were war machines used to kill people. They use 75,000 gallons or whatever it is of jet fuel, and we should not be glorifying machines that are used to kill.
Well, somebody who, and this is where trying to develop a sense of, I'm going to say respect, but complete dislike on my part for people who are anti-military. I felt horrible anti-military sentiment in the Vietnam era of 1970. From about 1968 on, when the country was turning against Vietnam, Those that protested, those that ran into Canada, which I still label as people who were just frightened to serve, they like to tell you, of course, they were just following their spirit of logic and common sense, and they're anti-military. Simply put, John, a strong military, the stronger we can make it, the better the deterrent is. These arguments about the amount of fuel that's burned or the decibels of noise that are being generated, sure, they're bullet points in an argument, but they make no sense, because the only way you can be prepared to send B-2s from the central part of the United States across the Atlantic Ocean and drop Moabs, the mother of all bombs, the big bunker busters, on target and return home is by practicing. So yes, we're going to burn fuel, but it's a cheap price to pay versus being in a war and spending billions, hundreds of billions, or trillions of dollars with dead people. Or military is a major deterrent of war. Cheap price.
Navy pilot Jim Frank, serving from 1965 to 1972. What was the most, in the final minutes of, I know you love to talk, I love to talk to you as well in long periods. Do you have one point where you were in that jet flying overhead thinking, I'm going to die?
If you flew in the military, Air Force, Navy, Marine, whoever, at some point there was something that was fear above normal fear. If you ever get into the cockpit of an airplane as a Navy or Marine or Air Force pilot, and if you're extremely confident, cocky, and comfortable, you got a problem. You better have an element of fear, because there are a myriad of things that can go wrong. And then on occasion, something really goes big time wrong. Engine catches fire, ordnance gets hung, your landing gear doesn't come down, and your heartbeat goes right up there. So every Navy pilot, every Marine, every Air Force pilot who flew a single seat fighter aircraft, they can tell you a story or two about something that caused their heart to be in their throat. But fear is normal. I mean, imagine landing on an aircraft carrier at 1 a.m. with no horizon, no stars in the sky, and you got a low fuel light on your instrument panel, and there's a tone pinging in your ear saying, low fuel, you better get down, and you got to find this ship and land on it. So yeah, you better be frightened, because that helps.
Thank you, Jim.
You bet, John, anytime.
You know it, baby.